Hello, we're live with Sara Frazetta, the granddaughter of the prime mover of fantasy art, Frank Frazetta. And if you don't know who he is, then I don't know what to say, but you're going to learn. So, hello, Sara.
Hello, Brendan. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. I'm just going to do this entropy and send a few links here. So why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself in case they don't know details?
Yeah, so I'm Sara Frazetta. I'm the owner of Frazetta Girls. It's an online brand. It's a legacy brand for my grandfather, Frank Frazetta. And I hate these little intros. That's it. I'm going to give a short and sweet intro. My answers will be long enough to make up for it.
That's true. Yeah, so, I mean, it would be amazing enough if you got a chance to talk to Frank Frazetta's progeny and it was like some middle-aged guy like me or, some old woman. But to know, on top of it, she's a ravishing nymph, just like Amanda Milius was, too.
It
makes it even more
amazing.
Well, it is. It's like just an amazing all-around thing to be doing. So thanks again for coming on. And I did have some questions. I do have many questions about your granddad, and I hope you may not know them all. These prying, almost personal family questions and things. But for me and a lot of people, he was the one who even got people into things like fantasy, or art in the first place. I would say it was him really that got me interested in art and doing art. And the reason I went to art school and everything else. So, and I know I'm not the only one. I mean, he's incredibly well respected. But some of the things I wanted to ask you about is how well respected is he in, say, the Fine Art Academy kind of sense and things like this? Because I wasn't sure. I know that they tend to look down on, if just being a fantasy artist to begin with or a commercial artist, they kind of stick their noses up, even though everything he's doing is incredibly fun and everybody loves it. And he's way more technically skilled and talented than any of them. But
you said it. No, it's a lot. Honestly, a lot hasn't changed. I mean, my grandpa always said that the Fine Art Academy was very pompous. By definition, his art is fine artwork. If you Google it and or open a dictionary, his artwork is fine art. But of course, they've never acknowledged him as a fine artist because he was an illustrator, comic artist, and a fantasy artist. So the Academy believes it's below that standard. So for example, for his artwork to be exhibited in the Met is still not an option. And I believe he wanted to change the style. Now, this is just a theory based on interviews I've read of his and remembering what he had said in his life with me in conversation. And he really wanted to move after he was done with illustration, after he was financially well off and he didn't have to take as many jobs. He wanted to get into more like wildlife artwork. And I believe that's so he could get into finally the category and be recognized how he wanted to be recognized. But he did a lot of personal work. There's one, for example, was a Maasai warrior. And Maasai warrior, he was very into the African culture, the Maasai tribes, and said they were the most fierce warriors of all. His whole house was decorated in African artifacts and decor. He and my grandma both enjoyed that. But he did this gorgeous piece. It was like 24 by 36 inches, one of his larger pieces. And it's just one of the most, I mean, the colors and the subject matter, it was gorgeous and fine. It was fine art. It was just a personal work of art. There's historical value. So there are pieces in that collection, in his collection, which arguably are some of the best that could be in exhibitions with other fine artists. But I just don't think he had the opportunity to really prove that to the world.
Well, I mean, to many, he's definitely considered a fine artist. And even if you look at classical artists, almost all of them, Rembrandt, any of them, they would have these fantasy themes a lot, especially Greek mythology and stuff like that. Very similar stuff, the nubile nymphs and the gods and the heroes and stuff. So in many ways, he was carrying on that tradition no matter what he was doing. I don't tend to, like myself, I would be opposed to their general line of thought and the criteria they give to fine art. But there's no doubt, he is a fine art. So you've never been approached by, say, a local large historic gallery to put up his works or anything?
We're in Sarasota, Florida, and we have the Ringling Museum. local to us, and I've been waiting for them to realize that the Frazetta Art Museum is in Boca Grande. A lot of the original art is housed in Sarasota. I won't disclose where, but and I've always been curious to why they don't come to us and want to do something with us. So I've put in feelers out there before because I would like to have his artwork exhibited at museums. But for the most part, no, they're really not interested. He had a showing at the Society of Illustrators in New York. Of course, some of his original artwork will be at the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, which is opening, I believe, in 2023. And recently, there was a fantasy exhibit at the Norman Rockwell Museum. So it usually has to tie in with either like illustrators or fantasy for it to be recognized and then put into another gallery or a museum.
Right. Sorry, your sound is a little bit not as good as it was when we started. I don't know if the fan is pointing a certain way or something, but it was a little bit. It's not too bad.
Here we go. How's it now?
Yeah, it sounds fine now. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so that's that's like just a disgrace to history and someone who's had a huge impact on history. I mean, I would say recent history, but it's actually getting pretty old now. But he, guys like him changed so much in that era, that fruitful decades where he was working. But when you were saying before that did he even care that he was doing fantasy art? Was he really into fantasy? He must have been to do Fire and Ice. He must have loved it. Did he, or did he not? Did he not care? Because you read stories, he sounds like he just kind of like he didn't even read Conan apparently, right? He just did. He did the archetypal look with the bangs, and I love how he put his own face on these things sometimes, which is even more excellent. Which is great.
So okay, the Conan story real quick. So basically, and can you hear me okay, Brendan? Is it okay? The volume?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad, yeah. Okay. It's okay.
If I need to, let's see 1 second. Let me just check my headphones real quick.
It might be just for me. I don't know. I thought it was a bit better at first.
Let me just 1 second.
No problem.
How's that now?
Sounded good.
Is that better? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the theme of the week, getting up and fixing things in the middle of my discussion. So
that's better. Yeah, that was better.
Okay, yeah, all right. It was a fan. We're just gonna get through this. So
sorry.
my grandpa did not read the Conan stories, unfortunately. So for the first Conan, for Conan the Adventurer, Lancer, the editor at Lancer was kind of leading him and said, listen, I want you to make an image, a depiction of Robert E. Howard's Conan that blows people away, similar to how James Bama's Doc Savage blew people away. So he gave him that overall mystique and gave him notes. So he went and he did that based off of the editor's suggestions. His best friend at the time, Roy Krinkle, who's also an illustrator, very well-known artist, he then helped him with the Conans that came afterwards. Since my grandpa never read The Frost Giant's Daughter, he never read the Conan Volume 5 with Manape. He basically told him what was happening in the stories, and he even sometimes would give him little concepts and rough works, and then my grandpa would work off of that. I don't believe he did that with the Conans. I think they were all my grandpa's rough sketches, but Roy was very, very much entwined with him and helping him create that. And as far as fantasy goes, I mean, he loved. What's King Kong? What is King Kong's not? Is that fantasy? What would that be? So he loved King Kong. He loved Disney's Fantasia, which is definitely fantasy.
Yeah, he had to love it a bit. He had to love somewhat. Like Fire and Ice was all his story, right? I mean, that's he had to be, or was it?
Yeah, Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway wrote the script, and it was more conceived through Ralph Bakshi. Ralph Bakshi kind of came to.
Right. Yeah. I thought they based it all off drawings that he did originally. He kind of just pumped out a bunch of. Maybe I have it backwards.
He did it. He conceptualized them after Ralph came and proposed this idea.
Okay.
gave him the characters. And then, but I mean, a lot like Tigra, for instance. Tigra, you can see inspiration in his Edgar Rice Burroughs pieces, his Deja Thoris. Like all of the women kind of look alike, so, and all of the barbarians kind of look alike, and the
They
monsters.
look like
So
him. If they're really tough, they look like him.
they
And
look
the
like
women,
him.
the women all have that kind of slightly Asiatic look. They're all usually like a brunette with like kind of funny eyes, like very feline. You can
Yes,
always tell. But yeah, he loved it.
yes.
I mean,
Yeah,
great.
well, he thought the world of how he looked, and so he was like, "Oh, I'm the perfect model," and he was like, he was doing selfies before selfies were a thing. I mean, he was a huge photography buff.
Right. But I do want to know this then, because this is what I don't understand. And you mentioned that Roy Krenkel guy. He's the one who I read saying, he said he witnessed your grandfather doing a painting, or maybe several, where he did not even do a, like, anybody knows about painting, and especially in oil paints, you do a drawing in pencil, then you do like your layers of paint slowly and slowly. He said he didn't do a drawing, he didn't do any layers, he just like got the paint on the brush and dab, and then there was your Conan. So, and I don't know, what do you know about that? Because that is absolutely amazing. Is that a model, or is that possible,
Okay,
or do you think that's?
it's kind of a myth. It really is.
Oh, is it?
There were instances of him doing that, like his piece. It was a piece called The Serpent, and I can't remember who was with him, but I think it was Russ Cochran, one of his friends and a collector. Russ Cochran and his son Billy were sitting in the studio, and Russ Cochran said, "Create something that will blow my mind, Frank." So my grandpa went up to the canvas and he just created an S, and then from the S he concepted this like octopus snake thing. I think it's an octopus, but it was named Serpent. I don't know what happened there, but it was like this like octopus tentacle wrapping around this guy. And my grandpa didn't have a rough work for that. That just was completely conceived there in the moment.
Oh,
But a
I've seen
lot
that
of
painting.
his,
So the painting
yes,
I've seen, is that the one you're talking about? He just did that in the moment.
yes, he did that one in the moment.
See, that
So
is
there
pretty
are,
amazing. Like, that's amazing.
yeah, that's amazing. And I think what happened, okay, so over the years, people said Frank Frazetta never used references. He even made a statement saying he never used references and he didn't do concepts, and it was all just popped right out of his imagination. So I think this legend, it kind of it stuck because I think my grandpa, when he, and again, this is just me theorizing, but when he saw the fans' reactions of that, like, he's like this godly type of artist that just is downloading these images and putting them up on the canvas, and there's no actual process. He saw the reaction was good, and he liked building that kind of like persona, and it was also part of my grandma and his like marketing really endeavor to create this man who's so legendary that he doesn't even need to pull a photo reference or
Okay, so
or
he
take
did
a
it.
photo. Yeah, so there was it built over time, and I want to get more things, like as I'm doing this legacy, I want to get more things historically accurate. Like I find it very important, because if you're going to inspire artists, you need the truth shall set you free. That's just my mentality on it. So we've been trying to, just show. Of course, there's instances where he didn't do it, and he was that magical godlike creature. But there was also instances where he relied on photographs and other references.
Yes, but even that, so like even that one you're saying with the snake guy, like everything, of course, the tone and the shadow, the light is perfect. I like straight out of
Mm-hmm.
his head. That is completely amazing, because you can tell he doesn't. I mean, so it sounds like more like he exaggerated something, an ability that he did definitely sort of have, anyways, but he just exaggerated,
He did.
because you
He
can see.
exaggerated. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you sorry, go on.
Well,
Yeah,
like
sorry.
like Boris, for instance, like
Yeah,
our nice little frame.
yeah.
Boris
Sorry. Sorry
Boris
for that.
Boris relied heavily on models, and my grandpa did have a degree of a photographic memory where he studied things so much that he could just pull it out if he needed to, like with a sketch or a watercolor or a pose, because he studied the human anatomy, he studied the animal anatomy, he watched them, he became an expert on these things that he was into. So yeah,
Yeah.
by focus, he was able to do that.
I've never seen any artist anywhere depict a horse flying through the air like your granddad did. Nobody ever, and whether that was imagination or, because it didn't. This is the thing though, because all his drawings and paintings, they don't look 100% real. Even if there is a model involved, there's a definitely imagination and his own invention going into it, and it still looks perfect. You know, that's not easy to do, especially with shading and everything else. But like, there's an unreal element to it all, which only makes it better as well. And you know that he's not just doing direct, as we said, sort of Boris Vallejo, who's also a good artist, but
he prided himself on that. That was another thing that he said in multiple interviews, that if he was going to replicate a photograph, that's what he would just take a photograph and there it is. So he wanted to create things that didn't exist. Uh-oh. Hold on, I can't hear you.
That happens every single time. Pardon me. That happens every single time.
I'm just glad it wasn't me, to be honest with you.
I don't know why. At least once that happened. Sorry. So it's no big deal. It's not the internet or anything.
You're fine.
What was I talking about? I totally lost what I was saying.
It's okay. You can ask me. I don't know. I never know.
You never know, yeah.
Yeah, I never know.
Oh yeah, straightforward way of like. So when he said about Conan that he didn't read the stories, he was like, nobody else has read them either. They just buy the paperback for my painting. I mean, that's probably true, but I mean, the stories are great.
I mean, a lot of the paperbacks that might be true. But after I read Conan, I'm like, sorry, but that's not true, Grandpa. Robert E. Howard is brilliant, and my grandpa, from what he knew, he respected Robert E. Howard and complimented his works quite a few times. He wished Robert was around to have seen Frazetta's depiction of his character. So there was definitely a respect there. I mean, it kind of just depended on the day and his mood on what he'd say about anything, really.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. So he was like those guys of that era. That sounds a lot like Amanda Milius's talk of her dad, John Milius. It was kind of very similar. You know, the first thing she did on that stream was pull out 2 giant prints of Frazettas that she'd just bought. One was the first one with Conan on the skulls. Is that Conan the Conqueror? What's that one?
Conan the Adventurer. Conan the Adventurer.
Okay, right. And the one where he's chained up and he's about to fight the big snake.
Conan the Usurper. Yep, that one's awesome. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Like big giant ones too. So you are like, what? How can I say this? Like, you seem to be really spearheading this for your family, keeping it going now. Am I wrong? I mean, are you like in charge of the estate, as it were? Is that how it is, or like?
I would say so little backstory. I had just graduated from college. I was getting into marketing, advertising, working at like some post-production. And my mom approached me soon after my grandpa had passed away. And she's like, I know that, she is very innocently, she's like, I know that you know about social media and marketing, and that's what you just went to school for. She's like, would you be interested in coming and helping us with the Frazetta estate? So, I mean, it started off really not, there wasn't like a business to take over. My uncle, Frank, and my grandma were the ones running this business for years. So when the business came to me, we had old vintage posters, and that was it. So that's the business that I inherited. It was you get to use Frank Frazetta, run with it. So
old posters of like any of the arts he did. Like, I guess not. You probably don't have rights to all the movie posters and things, or do you? I don't know. Depends on what he signed off.
It's can be interpretive with law.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But so we just really started just going to some comic conventions and meeting fans. And at this time, Robert Rodriguez was hoping to get Fire and Ice off the ground with a remake. And he started producing, so he started producing really cool, like limited edition Giclées and reinventing the wheel and showing like how Frazetta can be marketed now to like with full sublimation shirts, like things that I was 23 years old. I knew what my grandpa did. I saw him, but mostly as grandpa. I didn't really at this time understand the impact he made on pop culture and everything that I did love. So I was kind of just discovering it as I got into it. And it's been a journey. It's been a wild journey. we decided to take Frazetta Girls online in 2017, and now it's just my partner Joe and I running the business. But my uncle Bill, my mom, and my aunt Heidi, they all, when the estate split up, they all kind of split up the rights for some of the pieces of artwork. So because the family didn't want to work together, but that's changed over the years, and we've all grown close. So they trust me. My aunt, my uncle Bill, and my mom all trust me with really being the holding the torch and carrying on the legacy. So I appreciate them giving me the opportunity.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's great.
Yeah.
And you need the family legacy like yours needs someone like that to do that, for sure.
For
like
sure.
I mentioned to you, like what happened with the Tolkien estate recently seems like a bit of a travesty. And what are the safeguards? When you have a family legacy like that with possible continual regenerative powers, and you don't want to lose the rights, to Death Dealer or whatever, different things, Fire and Ice, and have them reinterpreted in some horrible way and destroyed. But I guess all you can do is, how do you do it?
Well,
is it a concern of yours?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think my family and we can all agree that we have no interest in ever selling the rights, like Tolkien sold his rights in 1969 to a holding company, and then that's when it started getting muddy. But I think our intention is always to keep it as close to us as possible, and if we have to do things in an independent fashion to be able to control the narrative, and then of course secure intellectual property and build on intellectual property, that's the goal, and the mission is to keep it close, because it is unfortunate. Hollywood investors, they don't always have the best intention for it, and I want to keep everything very integral to what my grandfather wanted, as well as my grandmother.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly would not like that sort of carry on where totally just warping and changing the whole thing, just taking the name and running with it commercially. Someone in the chat actually asks, could you ask her why books of Frank's aren't very commonly available? And then the comment right after is, they get published, but they go out of print. He's easier to get this from early Renaissance artists. Is there, do you have the rights to the books about him, or you obviously do?
So we Frazetta Girls, we've been in a lawsuit for a while now over this, sure. and we were really disappointed that Frazetta books weren't readily available, because as an artist, you want to be able to hold something, have it tangible, look through these books, use them as references, use them as inspiration. So publications, arguably, might be the most important thing to the Frazetta legacy. So I guess this person in the chat hasn't seen the news, but we didn't officially announce it on our page yet, but it's kind of starting to circulate. We're working with Taschen to publish a 472-page Frazetta book, and it will be readily available. It will be a Frazetta coffee table book, a Frazetta Bible. Might be too heavy for the coffee table, depending on what kind of coffee table you have. But we've been working years to make this happen. And when Taschen came to us, I was like, I had that moment, like this out of body experience of like, finally it's happening. This needs to happen.
They're great. I have a bunch of their books. Yeah, they're good.
I love their books. Yeah, I just bought my mom the big Mickey Mouse book, not for Christmas last year, all of the Disney archives, and she just loves it. I mean, they just make quality books, and they're very affordable. I mean, the masterpieces of fantasy art that came out, it was 600 pages for $200. This giant book. I mean, they have their own press, so of course, but still.
Where are they from? Are they German or something? Taschen?
Tashen's Germany. Yep.
Right. Yeah. No, they are very good. I like some of their books actually, even I would say, like your grandfather, they changed my life in some ways, because I remember getting one of them once. It was just like a book on was it pre-Raphaelites or whatever, and Victorian art generally, I think it was, and like it was so stunningly good, and all full color, like nice and nicely done all the way through. It just really brought home to me kind of the art that had been lost from that, with the when that's a whole other issue. My
Yeah.
ranting against
Um,
postmodernism stuff like that, but like
that's
that's
cool.
so
Yeah.
they are the best. So that's good. I didn't even know they were still around, man. So that's really great.
Mhm.
So there you go,
Oh,
buddy. You can go buy it soon, hopefully. How long?
yeah.
You don't know how long it'll be, or do you know?
January 2023. It will be available in Europe in November, but it will be
That's it.
available in the States in January.
Oh my God, that's amazing news.
Yeah.
I'll have to get one of those too. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Let me see. So did you? I think I saw you complaining about this, and like this, I don't know if this is you don't want to talk about it or anything, but I've seen he used to get flack, I think, from sort of feminist groups, probably for all the nudes or something. And does that still happen, or does everyone just say they love it now, or what?
Honestly, it's starting to change. And I think the generation that's understanding it are you call them the Zoomers, Gen
Yeah,
Z.
yeah,
And a Gen Z, they look at the art, they really look at the art, because this is what I appreciate about that generation. They're into like the vintage aesthetic. They're very like they love anything vintage, and they want to know everything about it. And when they actually go to the Frazetta body of work, not they don't just see a piece and judge it. They do a little bit of homework, figure it out. And their comments, a lot of their comments are about that Frazetta was into equality. And he was, because if you look at Frazetta's body of work, he has as many male nudes as female nudes.
oh
And
yeah,
he appreciated both beautiful men and beautiful women. He said it multiple times, and that's why he couldn't understand when the critics said, "Oh, he just puts these damsels in distress and over sexualizes women." And I'm like, I don't think they're really looking at the men. So
yeah.
he wanted everything to be beautiful in his piece of work, whether it was a tree or a mushroom, or I mean, he had a lot of sexual innuendos, and for him, it was just he wanted to express. It was a very simple message. Anything in life can be beautiful. So I think that whole stereotype of Frazetta's, he's degrading women. That's passing, because people are taking the time now to really understand it. So I'm thankful for that.
I would say it was just a passing thing, like someone with a political agenda using it as an excuse, maybe, or something. I don't know. It's just that, but something
Probably.
visibly fun and enjoyable, and just sort of like, I don't know. It's so hard to find something to complain about in it.
Well,
If you want
I think it was weird, because I don't really know what the political landscape was like back in the 70s, but it seemed to be in the 70s that's when he was getting the most flack for it. But
that's when feminists were more strictly about, probably rightly so, anti-porn and stuff like this, right? But then they kind of switched in recent years, almost too much the other way. I mean, we shouldn't probably talk too much about that.
Yeah, no, you won't be monetized on YouTube.
Exactly. Yeah, that we shouldn't be doing there. But I was going to ask, what's his highest valued paintings this day?
So on record, his Egyptian Queen sold for 5.4 million, and that was the highest price on record. But there are pieces in his collection that are still owned by the family that are valued at over $15 million each. So there's private collectors that also own really significant pieces that would maybe be worth that or more. Obviously it's what people are willing to pay, but based on intellectual property, based on notoriety, he will soon be fetching 15 to 20 million for painting, which
well,
I won't be, but for the Rosetta legacy, it's good.
You won't see any of it. You're his granddaughter. You must see some ounce of that now.
So when he passed away, he split up the original artwork for his kids. Before he passed away, he didn't pass away and split up artwork. But before he passed away, he split up artwork for his kids. So they're very happy. They're doing very well. But for the majority of his kids they're very sentimental with the artwork, and they don't want to just sell it off either. So they will, because the theory, life is short, and my grandparents always sold art as well. So they will, but also my mom, like I said, she's, I don't know if I said this actually, but I'm helping her curate the Frazetta Art Museum in Boca Grande, and that is housing just her collection of artwork. Hopefully my Aunt Heidi will be joining us as well. My Uncle Bill might be exhibiting his collection soon. So they're still very passionate about the legacy and for fans to see the artwork, which is great.
Right. So at some point there might be, I saw Kirk Hammett bought one for 1 million. Which one was it?
Yeah.
The guy from,
he
the
bought,
guitar player from Metallica.
Yeah, Kirk. He bought Conan the Conqueror, which is also known as Berserker. And he owns the Dracula meets Wolfman, a couple other little creepy in the Eerie. Obviously he's a horror fan, so that's his preferred subject matter. So yeah, he has his it's Alive. I think that's the tour name. He hasn't done that obviously since COVID, but I think he'll get it back going again at some point. And they just had a great exhibit in Madrid. It's called, I'm going to probably butcher this, but the Caixa Forum, and the Caixa, I don't know if the Z or the X is silent. I don't know. But it's a great fantasy comic art exhibit, and all of these like insane inks that I've never seen before, because like I said, my grandparents always sold original art, but these Kubla Khan ink drawings are all there, and oh my God, they're in the Middle Earth.
Kubla Khan ink drawings. Really?
Yeah, really great.
Oh, that's amazing. Sorry, I have a couple of super chats here I just want to get to. Is the museum in PA still open? I saw the ad posting on the FB page. Also, thank you for what you do and keeping Mr. Frazetta's legacy.
Yeah, there's a lot of we posted this old ad in the Life and Art of Frank Frazetta. That's the group I run on Facebook, and there was an old ad from 1996 in the Veritech comic, and my grandparents at the time had closed down the museum in downtown East Stroudsburg. That was the first museum location, and they excuse me. And they moved it to Boca Grande, Florida, because that's where they were going to retire. And they opened this. It's a really weird place to have a museum, but they ended up putting it in Boca Grande, Florida. Yeah, it's like
a small town or something, or
yeah, it's a 7-mile island with like the Rockefellers and the DuPonts, and it's like this very esteemed island. And then you have the Frank Frazetta Art Museum in the middle of town. So it was a very interesting choice. I mean, I'm not surprised.
Well, so potentially a hyper rich clientele, I guess, would wander through there. Was that the part of it there?
That could have been. I who knows? My grandma she didn't get enough credit for her marketing ability. She was very talented in many ways. So
I love the photos he took of her with her, and she seemed like just a cool woman. Like, she's on the ATV and she's like got her fist in the air.
That's even weirder. That was my Aunt Heidi.
Okay, never mind. I'm sorry.
No. His wife wasn't that much younger. She was in her late 40s at the time, and her body, she just, I think she would have been on that ATV if she felt confident with her body at the time, but she was going through a little bit of a drinking phase, and she wasn't looking her best. So she had.
There's no shortage of nudes of her. I mean, I've seen a good few in her prime.
Yeah,
I mean, that sounds rude. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. We're not modest. It's Frazetta Art. How can you be modest? So, with all of that said, I'm still not getting to my point. So we posted this old ad, and then people were like commenting and saying, so the museum closed. They weren't aware of the date, 1996. So there is still a museum open in Pennsylvania. Again, it doesn't have the full collection. It has part of the collection. And then, like I mentioned before, there was a first location, which was downtown East Stroudsburg. That location may be opened by my Uncle Bill again. So you do have to travel to see the art, to see all of the art. It's not in one place anymore. And quite frankly, it's really never been all in one place, because how much art my grandpa and grandma sold over the years. But they did a good job at alluding to that, like, the art is sacred. It's never sold. But then, of course, when you'd come in the museum, you hear all these stories all the time. My grandma would be like, "So how much cash do you have? Do you want to buy an original drawing?" And she'd start like kind of making her hustle pitch. So again, that was part of the mystique, the branding of Frazetta.
Right. I wouldn't think compared to others, he would need too much work in that regard. It's like I can imagine people being desperate for just to get his work, like people that people that know about art and like the people, famous people at that time, like that would clamor to him, like Clint Eastwood and George Lucas and that. A friend of mine made a comment. Your grandfather was magnificent talent, and that the masters of antiquity, my friend Dave Martell said this, masters of antiquity would recognize as their equal. Thank you for continuing to speak with us about that. But yes, it is true. He is really, I mean, this is the thing. I do think he should, he is in some way more the inheritor of that tradition than almost anybody else I can think of in a lot of ways, even though he was kind of forced by the times he lived in to be strictly a commercial artist and have to do things, he would be given the subject and he would have to paint it, as opposed to just being able to paint whatever he wanted, and with which he, I suppose he did that as well. But, he really was, certainly his skill level was at that level. And even a lot of them wouldn't have been able to do some of the stuff he did, at least partly from his own imagination that he was obviously doing, because of the not 100% model, 100% replication in his paintings that he, like a lot of it, he was imbuing with his own ability. Like even some of his watercolors, and they're so crazy. Like there's no way he would, like one of the first, like what's that one with the reclining blonde woman, and she's nude, of course, and there's like a black jaguar and 3 wolves behind her.
Yeah, Golden Girl. Yeah, that one. That's my
amazing.
favorite piece. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. Really?
Yep. That one.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's the watercolors. That one, it's an interesting story. That one was dated, copyrighted later than it was actually done, and I'm sure that's because of copyright law. But it was actually done in like the 50s when he was. In my opinion, I liked I preferred my grandpa's artwork when he was. I liked his artwork from all of the decades, but you can see something in it that's very. It tells the story of who he is when you see his artwork from the 50s, the late 50s, because at that point in his life, at that point in his career, he was like, I'm going to prove to the world who I think I am. And you could see that grit in the artwork, like this, I'm gonna show the world what I am. And to your point that you said before, I mean, he definitely could replicate fine art. I mean, he started drawing when he was 3 years old, and some of the little flip books he created, and then the replications of fine art when he was only a teen were pretty mind blowing. I mean, he was a child prodigy. He was gifted. He was someone that was born with a gift, and then of course with a gift you have to practice and be dedicated to your craft. And so it was the perfect combination. He dedicated his life to art, and he used his God-given talent. So he could have done anything. He always said that. He's like, he'd sometimes respond to the critics, like for instance when he was, I don't know where someone wrote about him that really pissed him off. I believe it was published in a magazine, and they said he was washed up, his time was over, and that's when he did back-to-back Death Dealer and then Silver Warrior, to kind of say, oh yeah, like I'm washed up. Here's my sit in glory of my arguably best paintings that I've ever created in my career. So he just needed he didn't. Most of the time, my grandpa was a person that liked to spend time alone. He was very connected with nature, very connected with himself. He didn't need like outside stimulus. He didn't really care about the critics, but he did have a very sensitive side where he wanted to make sure his fans were enjoying the artwork. He was definitely an artist who didn't paint for himself. He was painting for his fans, which I think is very special.
Yes, and when you mention this 50 stuff, it reminds me like some of the most amazing comics I've ever seen, were some of the comics he was doing. The content of the comics I wouldn't be the hugest fan of. Some of them were kind of silly, but just these ink drawings. Yeah, and that's another example of his sort of exaggerated motion of the people and the animals that's very much him. That's not real. It's just like but it's just perfect and amazing, and not like anybody else would do. It's absolute mastery of anatomy and how something might work, and in a most exaggerated kind of romantic way that isn't exactly real, precisely looking from a model type real. And I don't know. You're right.
Yeah.
I remember the 50s comics of his and thinking like, Jesus, this is like, nobody does anything like this.
Oh, well, he was so attached to design being the first and foremost of anything. So, for instance, a lot of his art pieces, you can find something that might be like missing, some would say, or not completely proportionate, but or anatomically incorrect, like impossible, like a stance. But my grandpa would argue back and say, sure, I could have done it the correct way, but then that would have taken away from the overall design and how your eye like dances around the canvas.
Exactly.
So
that's the important part. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, it's fantasy, guys. Like it's my art. I can do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah. He would make it better by doing it his way. It's like, you get some pedant who's like, it doesn't look totally real. It's not, it's not meant to look real. Like, for God's sake.
You say fooey. That's when I would talk about to Grandpa like a couple of times at the end. He had dementia. He was like older and everything, but we'd have these silly conversations. And my grandpa and I were very close throughout the years. And I'd say, Grandpa, I was like, why do you always? I would just like bust his balls. I'm like, why do you always hide the feet and the hands? Like you can't draw hands and feet. And then he'd get so worked up and he'd pull out like Reassembled Man, the one with the hand and the girls in it, and then show me the feet. And he's like, I can draw anything. He's like, I just don't want to spend my time drawing that, and it shouldn't be the focal point. And he's like, what have you done? And I'm like, nothing. Nothing. I've done nothing.
No, that's excellent. That's the kind of story I expect to hear. Yes, that even his own grandchild. What have you done?
Yeah.
How dare you? How dare you?
Yeah, get away from me, peasant.
Okay, Dave Martell also asks, Sarah, what are your aspirations as an artist yourself?
Honestly, I started drawing in 2017 after I got a surgery. I couldn't move. I was very much like my grandpa in a way of like always being like a gym buff, like very athletic. I mean, I'm not athletic, but I would try to be athletic.
Well, you look
keep myself in motion. But so when I got a surgery, I was out of commission for a month, and I'm like, geez, what the hell am I going to do? So I picked up a pencil and a paper, and I looked at one of my grandpa's silly, funny animal drawing, and I just like copied it. And I was like, I think I might have been on a painkiller. So I looked at it and I was like, this is pretty good, but whatever. It started from there where I was like, maybe I could draw, but I kept with it, and I still am drawing. I haven't done any actual like training and I need to, and I will, but I did it because I feel like it's like, you don't know something until you go through it, until you experience it, until you do it. So I wanted to draw just to really understand how great my grandpa is and how great other artists are and what it takes for like the mind to be able to see something and then interpret it in 2D. Like it's so damn difficult. So honestly, that was my motivation. I would definitely have my own interests and my own style to put into it, but I have to get the foundations down, because if you don't have the foundations, you got to have the technicalities, and then you can use your imagination and create. So when I invest the time, I'll be able to speak on that more, I guess.
Someone says your audio is getting a bit bad again. I think maybe if you just sit forward or something. If you're just on a laptop, it should be all right. It's probably sorry.
Know what's going on.
It did sound like it. It's not too bad. It's okay.
It's spotty. I hate that.
But like, a lot of things are explained more. They say it's surprising the sort of things that are actually turn out to be genetic when you think it was entirely a matter of experience. So it's possible you are carrying that Frazetta gene, whether it comes out in you or your children or whatever, and Frank's back all over again, or even better than before, or in terms of talent all over the place, right?
I agree.
It's entirely possible. So let's see here. What else have I got for you? Questions. Uh, who were his favorite artists? I would be curious about this.
So he was really inspired by. Can you hear me? I'm like all like now I'm in my head about the audio.
Oh, sorry.
About the audio.
It's not bad. I think it's okay. Yeah, I think
Is it
it's
spotting? I'm trying to figure out as if it's my Wi-Fi or.
It kind of sounds like you became a bit slightly distant. It's not as loud, but it's not as bad as it was before. I think it's okay. I wouldn't worry too much.
I'll just stay a little bit closer. So he was very heavily inspired by Hal Foster, by Joseph Clement Cole, J. Allen St. John, supposedly Jose Sagreus, a Spanish artist, and P.C. Sager, like a lot of just the old masters. I don't really remember him ever like having a favorite artist that he gushed about. I mean, he was his favorite artist, himself.
Oh, that's funny. I think he liked N.C. Wyeth in that, didn't he? Those
N.C. Wyeth, yeah. He loved N.C. Wyeth. He liked James Bama. I don't know because you asked me, you were talking about this before, but Mobius. I'm pretty sure he appreciated Mobius. I don't know if it was his preferred style. I'm obsessed with Mobius. There's a lot of parallels between Mobius and Frazetta in a lot of ways. Like Mobius spoke about wanting to put pleasure above all in his creative process, and that was also like my grandfather. Mobius also stated that he referred a lot from his imagination, pulling from things that he had really studied over the years, and then he could tap into that. So there were a lot of very spiritual similarities to Mobius and Frazetta, which is interesting. And what's really interesting is their art is actually in that forum together, the Caixa Forum in Madrid. So there's Mobius originals and Frazetta originals on display together under one roof. I know. If I could just get to
when
Madrid.
Is this happening? I can't go to Madrid, but Jesus, I wish I could.
I believe I think it's ending in October, unfortunately.
Oh.
Yeah. I know.
That would be good.
I'm sure it will happen again, something like this.
Yeah, that should be in every major city in the world. Imagine that, being able to go and see the originals. Because originals really do make a whole lot of difference. I remember seeing the originals of there's an Irish artist, amazing. You'd like him. What's his name? Oh God, what's his name? He's famous for stained glass. And then he did these illustrations, and it was sort of in the style of what's that guy? Aubrey Beardsley. You know that guy at all? Much earlier than your granddad.
I'm horrible with names. Okay. I probably would recognize it if I saw his artwork.
Well, you'd like it though. Maybe I can send you some later. It's like pen and ink, kind of art nouveau. But when I saw the drawings in real life, I couldn't believe the detail and like the tininess of the whatever, like little tiny little. He was painting with a needle or something, you know. They're inking with a needle, like so. It just like when you see things in real life, the actual thing, not just the print, it really makes the world of difference. I do. Especially also when I went to the Rijksmuseum and saw the Rembrandts, I was like, "Oh my God, I couldn't believe it." It was see them in person.
Yeah, it's a spiritual experience. You have to see
you can see the strokes. Just like when you go, you can see your grandfather's originals, and you can see the paint stroke, and you get an idea of you get more of an idea of what the genius because that he knew. Like, the perfect splash of paint right there. Like, oh wow, like how did he do it? You know?
Yeah, it's really incredible. I mean, when people come into the museum, they cry. Like they're so moved by the art and being able to see the brush strokes and being able to feel like they get into a little bit of the mind of Frank Frazetta. And my grandpa, he worked really small too. Most of his pieces were like 8 by 10 inches, which is insane. They were tiny. Like yeah, I mean
8 by 10, so like A4, not even A4.
Yeah, they were tiny.
I didn't know that. So he's working with he's working little teeny brush, like a brush with like 3 little sow hairs on it. Yeah. That's amazing. So hold on, Dave Martell is super chatting me again. He says, "Was Frank a religious man?" He wants to know.
He was agnostic. So he believed in a God. He never had a religion that he identified with.
Right. And Dave is asking this because he's also Italian American. He says, how important was his Italian heritage? Was music an inspiration for him at all? If so, what kind?
He was pretty proud of his Italian heritage. He was Sicilian, so hot-blooded Sicilian from Brooklyn. You know, that back in the day, it was odd, like when you realize how segregated the community was, even in New York. Irish was separated from Ireland. Irish people were separated from Italians, and so on and so forth. So I think there was that just sense of self, sense of this is who I am, this is the community I belong to. But he was heavily influenced by music. He loved Frank Sinatra, who was also Sicilian. I don't think that's a coincidence. And he also loved classical music, Stravinsky. I'd say classical music was his favorite to create to. That would always be on when I was in the studio, and he'd say you can't paint to anything else. Sinatra was his music he'd listen to when he was like developing film or whatever, whatever else he was doing.
No, it's true. I've if I ever paint or something like that, classical music definitely does help. It puts you in the right frame of mind.
Oh yeah, music's everything. I can't do anything without music. Or I'm depressed.
Yeah,
like, oh God, where's my music?
Yeah, I know it does. It helps with virtually everything. Yeah. So who can I ask? Who are your favorite artists apart from your granddad? Like him, you would say it's me. It's
Frank Frazetta. No, not me. Yeah, and Frank Frazetta. Not me though. Oh my God. But I really love Julie Bell. I think her work is incredible. There is a girl on Instagram. Her name is, oh God, the pronunciation, Bao Pham, and she draws these just like beautiful little like whimsical portraits with like flowers and hummingbirds and butterflies, and just this like, I love artists that depict utopia, because that's the world I want to live in. So if it's like a Tolkien kind of reminiscent, like of Tolkien's worlds with the hobbits. So anyone that has that style, I mean, it's hard to say like my favorites now, because there's so much on social media now that I'm exposed to every day. So it really varies on who I find like a new favorite every single day. I'm like, this is it. This is the inspiration. And I use Instagram like a mood board. So I'll post in my stories, like who's inspiring me for the day. So, but yeah, Frank Frazetta, of course, that's the default answer.
And are you not gathering new artists to yourself for projects and things as well? Am I right in saying that?
For the comics, yeah. We are working with Bill Sienkiewicz is one of my. I love him. I love his art. He's definitely one of my favorite artists. When I saw Bill Sienkiewicz's artwork on a Kid Cudi album back in, I believe it was 2012, I didn't know who Bill Sienkiewicz was. I didn't know who the artist was, but his style deeply moved me. And then when I met him at a comic convention and it all kind of pulled together, I was like, oh my God, you're the artist that did this cover that impacted me. So we had Bill Sienkiewicz on Death Dealer issue 2, which was a dream come true. Other artists that like, we've had Simone Bianchi, a great Italian artist, Gabrielle Dell'Otto. We just had a cover by David Finch. So a lot of great creatives coming in the pool and helping us create this series. And it's just so exciting. It's so exciting to see their interpretation of my grandfather's artwork and to keep inspiring in this way.
And do they try to draw in their own style, or do they try to do a Frank Frazetta kind of style?
They draw it in their own way, and that's something I really appreciate. That even with the comics, with the interiors, we didn't want an artist that was going to come in. We have Stefano Martino doing the interiors, and it's very much Stefano Martino's style. And then Axel Medallion came in with issue number 4, and again, very much their own style. They're doing more in a style of a tribute to Frazetta, but we didn't want to have someone come in and replicate Frazetta because you can't.
You can't do it. It's like you
No.
said earlier. It's his creativity, his imagination that interpreted, saw a gorgeous girl that he was like, oh my god, wowza, that's the girl, and then he would take that from his memory and use that. So you can't replicate it. So we wouldn't even try. We're not that foolish.
Yeah, and it takes like he did have like the retinue of skills he had. Like he mastered watercolor painting, he mastered oil. These are entirely different disciplines altogether that people spend their lifetimes at. He seemed to do them quite quickly. But he was painting since he was, as you said, 2 or 3 or something. So
Yeah.
he mastered these things. It's not easy to do at all what he did, and most people still can't. So
it's interesting. He didn't start oil painting until he was in his 30s, which is really interesting. I didn't know that. He did watercolors, and he might have used like gouache a few times, but he went predominantly then into oils after, and I believe it was Roy Krinkle again who kind of taught him about oils, and then he loved oils because he was like, well, hell, this is amazing, because with watercolors it's so permanent, you can't go back and change it. You have to work from light to dark, or light to dark, and with oils he could go back and revise.
Yeah,
so he loved that about oils.
And I think he did that a bit too much. I know he changed some classic paintings, and not to say for the worst, but like they were fine the way they were, and didn't he?
If he could have just got it, it's so crazy because his reason was that he didn't have another canvas board, and or masonite board, and I'm like,
oh,
who
that's
the hell
funny.
who was like monitoring the situation?
What? I thought he was making good money, wasn't he? Wasn't he getting like 5,000 for a movie poster, for Clint Eastwood and all this? And that was like 50,000 back then or something.
He was very frugal. So at the end,
That's funny.
Very frugal.
For the classic painting. That's funny. For that reason, that's hilarious. But that's the kind of eccentricity that makes it excellent as well.
I've tried. Okay, so I've told this story before. I want to emphasize how frugal he was. When we were in Boca Grande, he had just sold a painting for $1 million. Another one. He sold Conan the Destroyer for $1 million, and that broke the record. He was like so happy, and he was 84, bad health. My grandma had just passed away, and he had like a wad of hundreds, and very New Yorker, like all this cash in his pockets, like this big that he's never gonna spend. And we go over to the grocery store, and I'm like, Grandpa, I'm telling him to buy like Klondike bars or whatever, and he goes, $7, what a ripoff, and he wouldn't buy them. I'm like, what?
Oh, that's great.
Oh my god. Yeah. So
that kind of thing is hilarious. That and the what can you do
when you're like a little kid or whatever. That's funny.
Yeah.
That is funny. That's even more excellent than why is that so funny? Sorry.
Oh no, it is funny. It's because it's the truth. It's the truth about Frank Frazetta, who he was.
Well, that's hilarious though. Yeah. I remember reading and his he'd also be like his not giving a shit kind of thing. Like one of the Conan ones, I remember reading something like he it wasn't drying on time. He let the deadline go to the last minute, and he drew it, or he painted it in oils like the night before, and he put it in the oven to dry it because he just couldn't to deliver it on time, and the whole canvas warped up or something. Is that true?
That was Neanderthals. That painting's in the museum in Boca Grande. That will be open this February. But Neanderthals was a creepy cover. So when he was working with Warren, Creepy and Eerie, that he was doing the Creepy and Eerie magazines, Vampirella, and at this time in his life, he was just very relaxed. So he went in his basement. It was the night before. My grandma was hounding him, and she's like, Frank, we need the money. And he's like, I'll get to it. And she's like, no, it's the deadline's tomorrow. We have to ship it out tomorrow. So he ran down into the basement, pulled out masonite from his floor, because they just had it put mason. I don't know why they had masonite in the floors, but they had masonite in the boards of the floors. They just got it redone. So he pulled out the brand new masonite, brought it up, and then he painted Neanderthals in like 6 hours, put it in the oven, and it was out. And he's like, see, I can do anything. Again.
So it worked, did it? It dried out and it was fine.
It worked. Yeah, it worked. I don't know how it didn't mess it up. I mean, some of the stories, like I've talked to professors at Ringling, and they're like, yeah, that's not possible if you know how the mediums work. But that story, it looked, he only did like one layer of paint on the masonite, and then he left the masonite exposed. So that one was confirmed true by experts. And then of course we would hope that would be true from Frank Frazetta, but he likes to give himself an edge at times with stories.
Yeah, just that whole sort of not giving a shit attitude is just so hilarious. I don't know how that. That's just.
Oh yeah, he didn't give a shit about anything. No, he's.
Well, he did, but he didn't take any shit, or he's just kind of like,
yeah,
it's happening my way, or you can fuck off, kind of thing.
Right, he gave a shit about what he cared about, but not about anything else.
So I wanted to ask you, since he did live till 2010, and I think I know the answer, but this is my only other question I have for you, anyways, and then I'll let you go. I mean, you've been very gracious, and the information you've imparted is completely amazing. But what did you think of digital art?
So digital art started becoming popular in the 90s. At this time, that's when my grandpa had a major stroke. So he was kind of phasing out of art in general, just because he lost the ability to use his right hand. He did switch over to his left hand, but it's not comparable. It was very different. Not only did he lose the ability to use his right hand, he lost a lot of the essence of who he was, like his power, his memory. So
a stroke is like your brain exploding in one.
Exactly. And he had 8 strokes. He had 8 strokes from 1996 when he had his first stroke. Yeah, he had. I mean, I don't even know how he was alive at the end. I was like, "Oh, like Grandpa, like how are you?"
Sheer toughness, just pure.
Yeah, he was tough. He was tough. He didn't complain. I mean, he had so many problems. And before that, before even in the 90s, when he had his strokes, he had like a full decade. It was like from 82 to 92 of an undiagnosed thyroid problem, which I don't know if you've ever had any like autoimmune conditions, but he had hyperthyroid Graves' disease, and that took his imagination too. He was like destroyed. So even if you look at his catalog of art,
right, what does that do to you? Can I ask? I don't really know.
It makes it basically for him, when you're in hyperthyroid, you basically become like neurotic. So it was like you're over stimulated. His eye ended up popping out because it was undiagnosed for so long. That Graves' disease and he was so insecure about that. I mean, he went from this like amazing, charismatic, handsome guy to this frail eye popping out. He's like, I look like a monster. I can't talk. I can't remember people's names. Like it was, and that's why a lot of the times when fans would come to the museum, he just didn't want to be out in public like that. He's like, I want them to remember me for when I was in my prime and when I could articulate. And so this is like a time in his life when he never was really interested in taking in new things. So he didn't really get to have an opportunity to voice an opinion on digital art. Knowing his personality, though, because of how he was so attached to classical music and Frank Sinatra and the classic movies, I don't think he would have been one to just dive into it and use that as a tool. I think he would have wanted to always remain in a classic style approach.
Yeah, that's yes. I would. I mean, you would know better than me, obviously, but I would guess that as well. One last thing I wanted to say before I let you go is that I remember seeing there's a documentary. I only saw this recently. And it wasn't like it was the tail end of some. It wasn't a documentary. It was a speech he recorded for some group or something, and it's on YouTube. You know the one, and he's talking about how he would put his works up. It wasn't that he looked at them in the mirror. He turned them upside down.
Yes.
To make sure check the composition. Now that is first of all, that's the marker of a master, because that ultimately is the secret to the whole thing working. It doesn't matter how good or amazing your anatomy and everything else is. I mean, that you need all that as well. Ultimately, you have a composition, your lights and darks, and the way your eye travels across the canvas is the ultimate final thing. And you have to be a master and have mastered all the other stages to even begin to know that. Vasari talks about this. Vasari in the Lives of the Artists, when he's talking about Da Vinci and people like this, says the Romans would hold up a painting to a mirror, and then if it looked good in the mirror, then they knew that it was good. So he understood that. I hadn't heard that since I read Vasari, and I did not hear that again
until I heard Frank Frazetta say it in that little
Wow. Now, would that hold true for like if I'm photographing my artwork on my iPhone and then I see if it does, because it can mirror? No, it wouldn't. It would be on a camera, right?
No, it's more like
Mirror it.
it's true of photography as well, but it's more like, yeah, if you mirror an image or you turn it upside down and you still feel it looks pleasing, basically, is it like a feeling?
Yeah,
Then
it's
it's
weird
good.
because
Then it's good.
I don't know. I don't know what it is with the optics, but anytime if I will go in and it's like I can't see it and the problem until I take a picture of it. Then I'm like, ugh, there's a problem there. That's bad. Like, but it's only when I photograph it, then I somehow I don't know. I'll have to figure that out. what the brain's doing there. But it is so interesting that video. It's called Advice from the Master, and it was published by Galaxy Press. So I think it's on YouTube. It's great.
It's the most valuable,
Amazing.
just offhand artistic lesson anybody could have. In this in this thing that but it's there now. At least now it's on YouTube forever. So there you go. And if there's one thing you could say about your grandfather's work is he's created. I mean, he reached a level of mastery that I'm pretty sure will be remembered forever. I mean, he's totally different type of thing than the classics. He can't be because we're living in the modern age. But he's going to be remembered a lot longer than a lot of people who thought they were, Mr. Fine Artists.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
pretty sure. You could see that. Like,
yeah, he knew that. He's like, people won't forget me. Well, you'll see, and he was right. People won't forget him.
Yeah. So you can't fail. I mean, you.
I
have to
could,
work hard.
but it won't. Nothing that I do though will. It's like it's great. Like I want to fulfill a few dreams that my grandpa never got to finish. Like he always wanted Death Dealer and his other characters to become intellectual property and have their stories and for people to connect to them. But anything I do is very insignificant in the realm of how his art will be remembered. Like basically you can't ruin it because the art stands alone and will always stand the test of time. So I feel like, you have pressure on you because you want to honor your grandparents. You don't want to just be perceived with like the wrong intentions but you just it's impossible to ruin. He created legendary artwork.
Well, I would say what you're doing is extremely important, and you're doing it precisely right, so far at least. But hopefully, and
Thank you.
I'm sure you will. But no, it's not a small matter to have something, to inherit something like that, and then to keep it alive for everybody else, and to continue it. It's like it's like inheriting a vast estate, like a giant mansion, and keeping everyone employed and keeping everything going. It's like that, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So,
introducing it to the new world.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perennial thing. I'm sure it'll just keep coming back and back because I haven't seen anybody who's a better fantasy artist yet. I mean, have you? I don't.
No.
Mobius was close. Mobius in his own way, but that's
in his own way.
Totally different kind of thing as well. I don't know what. Totally different. But anyways, yeah. So, Sarah, I mean, for the love of God, thanks.
Thank you, Brendan. It was great talking to you.
Yes, it was great.
Yeah, no. I'm glad we got to do this. Like I said, I've been a big fan of your page for a while, and when you reached out, I was glad I checked those messages because sometimes I'll go for too long. And so thank you, Brendan. I had a great time with you.
Oh well, thanks very much, and thanks for doing that. And Frank Frazetta, one of the greatest fantasy artist probably of all time. Maybe we will see, but possibly forever.
Godfather of fantasy art. Yep.
I mean, that's it. So thanks a lot.
And thank you.
I guess that's it.
Goodbye. All right. Bye.
Thanks.